Good morning, America. Good afternoon, Europe, Africa. Good evening, Asia and Australasia. This is Napapong Pongnapang, Vice President for Asia and Australasia, the Isrrt. I am here today to have a very special program for our members across the world. This is the first Isrrt FAHLA FUJIFILM Asia Healthcare Learning Academy Education Collaboration webinar. And today will be the first episode with the topic of the art of digital radiography. Before we continue to our program, I would like to have our Isrrt President, Ms. Donna Newman, to give the opening speech. Donna.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from all over the world. The Isrrt is so excited to work with our partner Fuji to actually bring this learning academy. As radiographers around the world, we know that industry is so important to our patient care and elevating healthcare around the world. We know they do our research, we know they bring us our new products, and we know that they can help us find our best researchers and speakers that we can learn from. And we're so excited today to be partnering with you, Fuji, to bring our first episode of our Learning Academy. And so thank you again for partnering with us and joining us here today. And to our members all over the world, please stay tuned for our 4 episodes that you will see with us and Fuji over the next coming months. And I look forward to our speaker today. I'd like to turn over to Fuji for a moment to actually have you welcome our members to our Learning Academy. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Donna. And next, I would like to have the General Manager of FUJIFILM Asia Pacific Limited, Mr. Noriyuki Kawakubo, to give us the opening speech. Please welcome Mr. Kawakubo.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So my name is Kawakubo from FUJIFILM Asia Pacific. So first of all, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to get this opportunity. So it's very exciting and a very great pleasure for us to be a part of the event. So I hope this event will be valuable for everybody and also successful. So FUJIFILM try to contribute to the society with our innovative product and technologies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kawakubo. And now I would like to introduce our speaker, Mr. Dennis M. Bowman. He is the writer of computed radiography and digital radiography content creator for the 13th edition of Mirror Atlas of Radiographic Positioning Procedures, which has been published since 2015. And I believe our students from across the world learned the positioning from this book. And also, he is the co-author of Adaptive Radiography with Trauma, Image Critique, and Critical Thinking, which was published back in 2014 by Delma and Kangage. Please welcome Mr. Dennis M. Bowman on his first episode of Art of Digital Radiography.
I'll never stop seeing my patients as my #1 priority. It's the reason I come to work every day.
I'll never stop putting my patients first because I see them at their most vulnerable.
I'll never stop seeing how strong people really are, and I'll never stop working to help them feel stronger and healthier.
And we'll never stop helping medical professionals see patients in vivid new ways. Because you never stop, we'll never stop. We'll never stop advancing healthcare IT through image analytics and visualization technologies. Using our image technology expertise, we're designing healthcare IT systems to provide rapid access to extremely high-quality images, giving doctors the chance to analyze patient information and collaborate with colleagues in revolutionary new ways. And looking to the future, as the volume of clinical data continues to grow, we'll keep advancing IT systems that help healthcare access, analyze, share, and transmit vast amounts of information, all of which will be critical to the future of patient treatment and medical coordination. Because we'll never stop improving the future by building on over 80 years of creating value from innovation to help develop a brighter, healthier future for all. Never stop advancing healthcare IT. FUJIFILM, value from innovation.
everybody. My name is Dennis Bowman, and welcome to Art of Digital Radiography. Just a real quick intro on myself. I have been lucky enough to retire 3 years ago, but before that, I have been a radiographer for 40 years. And I worked at a few different hospitals, always in California. And the last one I worked at was a community hospital of the Monterey Peninsula, which we called CHOMP. So if you hear me talking about CHOMP, that's what I'm talking about. I was lucky enough to be the clinical instructor for the students there for over 20 years. So that was pretty much the highlight of my job, was being to be their teacher. In the last 15 years or so, I've created a couple of little X-ray businesses. One is Fluoro Rad Pro, and the other one's Digital Radiography Solutions. And I also am a speaker for a company called MTMI, where I've gone all around the States and Canada, and I've been lucky enough to actually even speak in other countries and things like that, not for MTMI, but just lucky enough to be able to do such a thing. So this talk today is just a little 45-minute one, but it's really just a setup that we wanted you to just kind of know about me and know about this kind of information. And really what Fuji's putting on is the a 400-minute talk. So it's an all-day event that's going to be happening probably in about a month or so. So this is the sort of just the setup, and it's just little pieces of that 400-minute talk. So with that, let's get going. One of the big things in the States is that when digital really first got going, which was in the early 2000s, even the late 1990s, but really 2000s is when most places started to get their first digital. At CHOMP, we got ours in 2003, so we've almost been digital there for 20 years. But people never really got trained that well, and then for the next 20 years, it's been the same. And then a lot of people are doing it the way they did film, and they just sort of took it over into digital. And that's not the way we should have done it, but there was nobody to teach us to do it any better, so that's just what we did. So finally, the ASRT, which is our national organization, the American Society of Radiologic Technologists, came up with this best practices in digital radiography. And they first did it in 2012, and then they updated and revised it a couple of years ago in 2019. It's an amazing, it's more than just an article, really. It's like a little booklet, really. And one of the things in it that they say is this: it is the responsibility of the radiographer to have complete and up-to-date knowledge regarding digital radiography while using radiation exposure techniques and dose optimization principles designed to minimize patient radiation exposure. Basically saying it's totally our responsibility as the radiographer to be up on the latest ideas and the latest equipment and know how to use it properly so that we can keep our dose to our patient as low as possible. Some of the parts in that best practices that they discuss are optimum KV, technique charts, using exposure index EI numbers, post-collimation, which is also called shuttering, grids, using the AEC, shielding, and using anatomic side markers. So in the big all-day talk that I'll be giving, I pretty much cover almost all of those and many, many other things. So we're going to start off, and I don't know, how many of you were lucky enough to ever use film either in your career or at least as a student. But, I'm going to guess that maybe half of you did and half of you didn't. So those of you that did, that, there was a certain optimum KV that we would use for every body part, and it should be that same way now. And it was always just the mass that you changed. So I'm going to show you from 50 kV to 100 kV. I'll do it with both CR and DR. So we'll start with CR. When I first made these slides up, I had next to it, it would have said like 10 mass, and the exposure index number would have been whatever it was. Then when we go to 60, it would have been half the mass. So it was that 15% rule with mass compensation. And then the EI number would be about the same. So know that all that's going on. I just didn't have the numbers because most people don't like seeing a lot of numbers. It just kind of mixes them up and doesn't make things better. If you look at this hand, you can see that the phalanges look pretty normal. The metacarpals look pretty normal, but the carpals are weird looking. And that's because it's not a real bone phantom. It's a plastic bone phantom. So don't really look at the carpals because it's just weird. But look at, just the body of the hand. Anytime you have low KV and a high mass, it's always a gorgeous image. That was true with film, it's true with CR, it's true with DR. It's just that you also have the most dose to your patient. So it's the worst thing you can do to the patient, but it is a great looking image. So know that, this is perfect and this is what we're going to be comparing everything else to. So this is CR, 50 kV, 60 kV, 70 kV, 80, 90, 100. And here's what all 6 of them look like. So you can see that the top 3 are brighter. The bottom 3 are not as bright, maybe even a little grayer, less contrast. All of them would be passable. All of them would be diagnostic. Now we'll do it with DR. Here's 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100. And here's what they all look like. And again, top 3 are brighter, bottom 3 are less bright and maybe a little bit has less contrast. All of them would be diagnostic. Not that I'm telling you to go out and shoot a 100 kV hand, but it is a diagnostic looking image. So again, know that, I'm just kind of flaming through this thing today because 45 minutes versus 400 minutes. So I'm definitely not going to be belaboring any points, and I'll just kind of be whipping through. But hopefully you'll just get a sense of it, and then you'll know that, hey, if you come back for the long one, for the 8-hour one, then you'll really have a chance. I'll have a chance to really take my time and build my case around all these things instead of just sort of hitting the high points. But there's a man, Barry Burns, who was the leading expert in the United States for years and years and years. He passed away about 5 years ago, but he was the guy that really first came up with that we should not be using the KVs we're using with film, and that we should be using 15 to 20 kV more. So, and this was his chart, or I put it together as a chart. I studied under him for years. And so he had it all in just different places, and I actually put this chart together with all his optimum KVs. So this is all the 15 to 20 kV higher than film tech KVs that he came up with. The chest in a bucky or grid already was high. It was already at 120-ish, so it just stayed there. The non-grid chest now is 85 to 95, and if you have a DR detector, a wireless DR detector, they default to 105. So, they are perfect at 105 without a grid. Abdomen, 85, 95. Iodine abdomen, that would be an IVP for kidneys, your bladder. So I don't even know if you guys do those. We don't really do them anymore. But if you do, it's 75, 80. Extremities, hands, feet, those kind of things, 65, 75. If you have a bigger patient and you're doing extremity but with a grid, it's 70, 80. If you got a really large patient and you're doing it in a bucky, it's 75, 85. All AP spines are 85, 95. 85 being like an older patient that really has almost no calcium. Anybody else that's healthy and stronger would be at least 90 to 95. All lateral spines, 85 to 100. And again, 85 would be the patient with no calcium. Ribs, upper and lower, 80 to 90. Skulls, 80 to 90. BE's already had a high KV, so we just sort of stay right there with it, 110, 120. But BE, with an air contrast BE, is now 100 to 110. We don't do that much pediatric work, so I don't have that many techniques. but I know that, the extremity work that we did, 50 to 65, and the pediatric chests, which would, of course, be a non-grid, is 70 to 85. So in 85, like we would do a 1-year-old in a little pigastat up against the, detector, and we would use 85 kV. And as you can see up here, that's the low kV that we would use on an adult. So that is a noticeably high kV for a pediatric patient. So these are charts that I came up with, and they're universal charts. So they will work with whatever vendor you have. These will work. I have a whole set of them for CR. I have a whole set of them for DR. Mostly today, I'm just talking about DR because that's sort of where the whole world's going. When the big talk, I definitely have more CR and DR. There is one little CR thing we'll be talking about a little later, though. So all these techniques are for both a male or a female. And as you can see up here, it's the 100% more mass chart. And I'll explain that coming up soon of what that means. There's three sizes of patients. There's a small, medium, large. Not that you can tell how small I am, but I am dead. I'm 140 pounds, so I am exactly right in the middle of the smalls. And sorry if you don't use pounds, but that's kind of what we use. So everything I have is in pounds. And so the next one up is a medium, and that's 160 to 200 pounds. Large is 200 to 240. So my abdomen, an AP abdomen with a grid at 40 inches, would be 85 kV at 13 mass. My AP ankle would be 70 kV at 2.4. My lateral C-spine gridded at 72 would be 85 at 11. My PA hand would be 66 at 1. My cross table hip would be 90 kV at 40 mass. So if you look this whole thing down, you'll see that there's about 30, maybe a little over 30 different projections here. And then here's page 2, and there's another 30. So between those two pages, you pretty much cover the whole body. Or if you don't, you're at something close enough that you'd be able to figure out whatever it was that isn't on there. These are the least mass charts. And a least mass, so there's 4 sets of charts, as you'll see coming up in the next couple slides, that the least mass, then there's a 33% more mass, a 66% more mass, and 100% more mass. So those 4, and so the 100% more is exactly double the least. Or the least is exactly half of the double of the 100% more. So now, where the other one was 13, this is 6.5. Where the other one was 2.4, it's 1.2. My lateral C-spine in the grid is now 5.5 mass. My PA hand is now a half a mass. The cross-table lateral hip is now 20 mass. So all the KVs are the same, but all the masses are half. And that's just how that technique chart plays out. So don't know if you know this book. In America, it is one of the it's the most famous of all the positioning books there is. It's been around since I think the 50s. It's like 60 something years going now or something like that, and maybe 70 years going now, I guess, if it was in the 50s. So this man here, Bruce Long, became, on this 13th edition, he became the first author of Merrill's. And so when that happened, he hired me because he wanted to create these digital technique charts. And he is a program director, so he has a huge program with a ton of students at a ton of different hospitals in his area. And so he had been using the technique charts, those universal charts, for years with all the students. And so he knew they worked, and he knew that he wanted them in Merrill's. So we worked on it for about a half a year and came up with like 250 techniques. Half of them were CR, half of them were DR, and we also put in an entrance dose, which is the ESE, for every one of those parts that had a technique also. So they've now been in Merrill's for years and years, and they now have their next editions already out. So these techniques have now been in Merrill's since, basically end of 2013 or start of 2014, I guess, is when it really happened. So, 7 years ago now. So what's the difference in these technique charts? We have the least mass chart. So that least mass chart is going to be exactly what it says. It's going to have the least mass of any other chart. On the other hand, it's also going to have the most chance of being a noisy image. And noise is what basically everybody worries about. If you go up to most techs and say, are you more worried about having a little bit too much mass and giving a little bit too much dose to your patient, or having an image that's got noise that whoever reads your images might not accept it because it's too noisy? 99 out of 100 people are going to tell you that's what they're worried about. So, and we'll talk, I have a huge part of my long talk is about that. So this is a little bit of a scary chart to use because it's definitely got the most chance of a noisy image. The next one up is the 33% more mass chart, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's got 33% more mass, it's 33% more dose to your patient, but it's got less chance of noise. Next chart, 66% more mass. It's a 66% more dose, but even less chance of noise. And then you have the 100% more mass chart, which again is double the least mass chart. So how do you use these charts? Now here again, I know that I'm not having much time to talk, not talk you into it, but try to make my point that this is something that you would love to use. When I have all day long to tell you about these things, then I have way more time to really make my case. But at some point, I'm going to hope that you're going to try it out. So how do you use these charts? Well, the way you do it is you start with that 100% more mass chart because it's got the least chance of noise. You have to look at the EI number, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. And on the big talk, again, there's a way bigger part of it than there is today. But you have to use that EI number because there's no other way to really critique an image. You can't look at the image and go, well, it looks good, so it must have been a good technique, because there's all kinds of things in the computer that can fix an image that was created with a bad technique. So the EI number is what you're using. Now that EI, and all vendors give you a range that they say if you're in that range, then it's a good image. And it was a good technique. So if you're in that range, but you're at the part of the range that shows you that you used more than you needed to use, and you could have used less and still been in the range, that's when you want to drop. So you shoot for, let's say, a week, and you look at all those EI numbers, and you go, yep, really, I could drop down a step in mass and still be in that range. Then you go to the 66% more mass chart. And you do it for another week, and you look, and you go, man, I think I could still go down. Okay, well, then you go to the 33% more mass chart. And if you still can go down, then you get down to that least mass chart. So this is a chart that, and all my charts, I'm not sure how they're going to do it with you guys, and as far as giving you these charts, if there's a way that you can just download it off their site. But at the end of the big talk, I'll go over my those. I told you I had a couple businesses, and so one of them, they both go to the same website where you can just get to it and click on it. So there's like 30, 40, like 45 charts in there. And they're all free. You just click on it. It's a PDF, and you can just print them up or download them if you want to put them in your phone or however it is you carry around this information. But this is showing you all the different charts that I have. So there's 4 DRs that are the 4 DR cesium DR, which is the good DR. It's way more expensive, but it also uses less mass, and it really has a better quality image. The gadolinium is sort of the cheap version of a DR, and it's nothing about it as good. It takes more mass. It doesn't have as sharp of an image, and so it's more dose to your patient, but it is way, way cheaper. So better for the bosses, but not better for you or your patients, or really your patients, because you're the one that's radiating them more, so you kind of got stuck with it. And then there's 4 CRs. the speeds aren't exactly perfect. I put them in there just because a lot of people wanted to have a speed to figure it out because they came from film and they were used to that way of thinking. But they don't always work perfectly because there isn't really such a thing anymore. But the masses are perfect of how they play out. And again, I just made up a mass. I just started it and said, okay, I'll start here at 10. So you can see it's the lowest mass, which means it's the best dose. So of all the charts, the least mass DR cesium chart is the best chart I have as far as saving radiation to your patient. And then if you just go up 33% more, which is a third more, you're at 13.3 mass. And you go up another third more and you're at 66%, you're at 16.6. And then you go to 100% more, and now you've just doubled 10 and you're at 20. And then there's just one gadolinium. We had a couple of rooms that were gadolinium at Chomp, so I made the chart for there, but I just made the one chart, and then I realized that it was just a fluke, that it was the same as the least mass chart for the CR. So at that point, I didn't really need to make, these other ones because we could just use the CR charts in our gadolinium room because they were the same techniques. So again, total fluke that happened that way, but it did happen that way. So then you just start here at, the CR, starting at 15, you go up a third more, you're at 20, you go up another third more, you're at 25, you double it, and you've doubled 15 to 30. So like I said, you should start at the 100% more mass. Now, if you're a DR room and you look at those techniques and you're still too afraid to use them, then what I would suggest is finding something more than 20. And you go, well, that's not going to do it, and that's not going to do it, and that's not going to do it, but that one would, and that one would. So you could use one of those two charts instead. And then you're going to see, yes, you can go down, and then you'll go down. Let's say you started at that one. Now you go to that one, and you go, okay, I still could go down. Now you're at the one that, you would have started at had it not scared you anyway. And then you can see, can I even go lower? Yeah, I think I can. Okay, and then you get there and you go, now we're at the bottom of that range. So I really can't go any lower. Okay, whatever. Even if you don't ever get past this one here, it's fantastic. If you haven't been using such a high kV and low mass before, you're still saving a lot of dose. There are two more sets of charts that I have, and these are because, as the other chart, we stopped at 240 pounds, which nowadays, is not that big of a person. There's people that are a whole lot bigger. There's lots of people that are a whole lot bigger. So for years, people have been asking me to make charts that have larger patients on them. I didn't know how to do it. And then I finally learned how to actually do the mathematics of how you do it and the calculations that are needed to be done to go up. And that once I learned that, then I can make these charts up. So these charts only are one pagers instead of two, because there aren't as many. There's no the pediatric. That other one had some pediatric stuff, and it had lots of screen things. And this one doesn't have nearly as many of them. And even when it does, like an ankle, I just put an AP and I didn't put the lateral because I wanted it to all fit on one page. So now, this first chart is an extra large, which is 240 to 280 pound patient, and then double X, which is an obese patient at 280 to 330, a 3X, which is 330 to 380, and a 4X, which is a morbidly obese patient, which is 380 to 440 pounds. So how much dose do you save? This is the whole reason that you want to go up in your kV and down in your mass, is that you want to save your patient radiation. So I have two of these charts. I have one set up at 72 inches and one for 40. They're pretty similar. In my big talk, I really plug a lot about using as much SID as you can. So that's why I picked the 72 over the 40, but doesn't really matter. So here's how this chart works. We're going to say that in the film days, for whatever body part it was, you use 70 kV at 20 mass, and your ESE, which is your entrance dose, was 33.0 MR, millirankin, and you didn't save any dose because that's where we're starting. Now you do the 15% rule of 15% of 70, and it's 10.5, and there's no such thing as go up to 80.5 kV. So it's either 81 or 80, just depends on where your machine defaults. And so our room defaulted to 81. So went to 81, and then you compensate by cutting your mass in half. So that's the 15% rule with mass compensation. And so now you're at 81 at 10, and your new entrance dose is 22.1, and you've saved 33%. So by doing that, you've cut your dose, a third of your dose out to your patient by just doing that. But again, if you remember, Barry said you could go up 15 to 20 kV. So we're only at 81. So now we go up to 85, we can drop to 8, and now we've saved 41% of the dose. But again, he said you could go all the way up to 20 kV. So we could really be at 90 at 6.3. So there, we're saving, 48.5. So you've almost saved half. Now at CHOMP, our radiologist said we're allowed to use those least mass charts. And they wanted us to. And it did have a little bit of model, and they actually called it diagnostic, or acceptable model would be how they would actually read it out. So instead of 10 mass, we were using 5. Instead of 8, we're using 4. So we were in the 66 or 70 or 74% zone. So basically, we've cut the dose 2/3, and we became one of the lowest dose hospitals in the United States once we did that. So that was pretty amazing. So how do you critique an image? So this is one of the biggest quandaries to me, because this is where I really counted myself as, in the film world, that was one of the things that I was truly an expert at, was critiquing an image. Not reading an image, not what the radiologist did as far as, pathology or anatomy or any of that stuff. But, hey, is this a good image? Yes or no? Why is it good? Why is it not good? What do you got to do to fix it? That I was very expert at. And then we went digital, and I became very not expert at it for years. Just, lost. Like, how do you do this? So we were still just doing it like it was film. If it looked good, it was good. If it didn't look good, it wasn't good. But I kind of knew that wasn't the way to do it, but we didn't know any other way because we weren't using the exposure numbers. We didn't believe that they worked correctly. And on my big talk, I'll kind of tell you how we figured that out, but it was basically me showing a student that it doesn't work and then finding out it does work and then realizing we don't even know what we're doing. And going to my boss and going, we don't know what we're doing. And that was the start of us learning how to do it finally. So the thing you have to have is you have to have that EI number. That's just the number one way to critique your image. And it's the only system we have. It's far from perfect. There are definitely things that can just mess up those numbers. And in my big talk, I'll go over those definitely. But basically, the point I want to make is your eyes can see if you have a modelly, which is a noisy image. Your eyes can see if you have burn. But if you have a really nice looking image, you can't tell if that was a perfect technique. So if you have a perfect technique, there's no way to know that that's true just by looking at the image, which you certainly could do with film. That was the beauty of film. There weren't that many beauties of film, but that was one of them. Was, if it was light, you didn't have enough mass. If it was perfect, you nailed the technique. If it was dark, it was too much mass. Done. It was that easy. Now it's impossible to prove that you use the ideal technique if the only gauge you're using is what that image looks like. So, what we did with film, that's how you did it. But you cannot do that with digital. And the reason is a thing called automatic rescaling. And so, I always use Fuji for this part of my talk because they invented it. So they were the ones that came out with the first CR and back in the 80s, early 80s, and they invented automatic rescaling, which is the, you've used the incorrect technique, but the computer knows what that image is supposed to look like. So it can just ignore that there was way too much mass used and still give you an image that looks like you used the right amount of mass. So to prove it, I'm going to just show you a bunch of this lateral skull image, taken at a bunch of different masses. So this is basically perfect. I was shooting for as close to a 400 S number as I could get, and this was as close as I could get it. It's 4 mass to get there. So that's the perfect technique. And we go to 8, and we go to 32. In the film world, this skull would be about as dark as this black. You'd see an outline of a skull, and that'd be about it. Maybe an outline. It might just be so dark you can't even see anything in there. This is 200 mass. So again, 4 was what we started with. And it's 4, and we also had an S number of 357. We now have 200 and an S number of 6, but it looks the same, right? I mean, look at these. 4, 8, 32, 200, and when we get to 400, we finally see a change. So when we get to be 100 mass, 100 times too much mass, we see a change. But I didn't level and window that. So if I could level and window that and make it look identical to the other one. So, you know, that's how robust automatic rescaling is. That's how good it is. That's why it's totally impossible for you to look at an image and go, oh, that was a good technique, you know. So, and then at 500 is a little bit still the same. It's all still just right there. So here's just another vendor. This is a DR detector now. So DR is different as far as how it plays out with too much mass. And almost always you can use less mass with DR than CR. So here we go with the 2 mass instead of 4. 4 mass. 8. 16, we're still hanging in there. And then at 32, this is what burn looks like. So you can see it there. You can start to see it there. And there is no level and windowing and getting it back. It's just gone. So burn is gone, always. And then at 45, you can see the whole thing starting to burn out. So there's where if you do level and window, you're still not going to see it nicely because burn disappears anatomy. So burn's a bad thing, as is model's a bad thing. So how much can you overexpose for CR and DR? For almost all of the CR vendors, you can use a minimum of 50 times too much and probably closer to 100 times too much and still have an image that's absolutely diagnostic. The DR seems to be more like 10 to 15 times, so not nearly as crazy. But still, you know, hey, you can use 10 times too much. It's still kind of outlandish, but not that outlandish because all the vendors kind of do it. So here's a little bit more on critiquing. One of the things that you want to be able to do is mag it up. So if you can make the image bigger, you just got a better chance of looking at it and checking for noise and burn. I don't know what the numbers are. It used to be like 1 in 3, but lately it's been more like 50%. So I'm not sure that's changing or I've just kind of lucked out with people that can do it. But it's usually between 1/3 and 1/2 of the places, the techs, that you're in your room. You've made your exposures, the images have come up on your monitor, and you look at them and you go, they're good, but they're not great. But if I level and windowed, I can make them look great. And that you're allowed to level and window and send them to PACS. So it's usually between 1/3 and 1/2 of the places allow their radiographers to do that. And at least 1/2 to 2/3 don't allow you to do it. And there's all kinds of reasons for it. I'm not going to get into it here. I don't even get into it in my big talk anymore. I used to, but most people were bored and didn't really care of why. So, but just they know, hey, I can or I can't. So if you can, that's great. If you can't, then you have to wait until you get it into your, PACS system. And once it's in PACS, then anybody's allowed to level and window, because at that point, there's nothing like, they're not going to see anything different. You can just hit the reset button and it goes right back to normal. But the goal is that you should be able to level and window and make it look great, totally passable. If you can make it look totally passable, they can. If you can't make it look passable, then you don't know if they can. And it doesn't matter that they have a way better monitor. Sometimes a way better monitor just doesn't help whatever the problem was that you had. So at that point, you're just turning in an image and you're hoping they can, which is a bad place to be, because if they can't, then you shouldn't have turned it in. You should have repeated it. Or a lot of times now, nobody repeats anything, but they should, because people are turning in lots of work that's kind of, I'd say it's unacceptable, but it isn't, because whoever was the radiologist, they ended up just hating it and reading it anyway, which means they did accept it. So you can't say it's unacceptable because they accepted it, but they didn't like it. Okay. So now I'm actually going to take a quick hit on this thing. Save that throat. So how much dose? So these are now going to be some really fun experiments. That this one I did with these two students, and it was when you take an X-ray of a patient's chest, what happens to the X-ray as it hits that person's body? Does it all just go through and get back to your, your whatever you have back there, your IR, your image receptor, or does it bounce off the patient? And if it does bounce off the patient, which angle does it bounce in? What happens to it? So we did it two different ways. We did it with an ion chamber over here that's going into an actual, a dosimeter where it's telling us exactly how much dose is hitting it. And we also used a cassette with a hand phantom so we could see what it looks like. We did it with a chest, with a grid. So it was a gridded chest technique, and we did it without a grid. This one's going 90 degrees to the patient, of which when we went 90 degrees, we actually hit that wall at 6 feet. So I redid the experiment so I could go further, but for what I'm going to show you guys, it's this one, because the other one has way more numbers, and again, way more numbers usually doesn't make anybody that happy. So then we went at 45 degrees, then we hit the wall over here at 8 feet, and then we did it here where you're just shooting the patient with the X-ray. The X-ray is coming straight back at 0 degrees, and there we could go all the way to the back of the room, so that wasn't an issue. Before I get into it, I want to just go a little bit about natural background radiation and just what we call things. And the natural background radiation is like cosmic and radon and potassium-40. And the last time anybody in the world did a survey of it was 2006. So the words that we use in America, or at least with my dosimeter, is a small r is a rad, and that means that the X-ray is still in the air and it hasn't touched a body yet. As soon as you get a capital R, which is a Rankine, then the radiation has touched the body. A milli capital R, which is an MR, is 1,000th of a rad or a Rankine. A micro R, capital R, is an umpersond. It looks like a U, but it's really an umpersond R. And so it's a micro R is 1,000th of an MR. So this is 1,000th of that. This is 1,000th of that. So this is 1,000,000th of that. So when you go, it had 6 millirank, 6 micro R's. It's 6/1,000,000th of an R. So you go, well, that's not much. And you go, it isn't much, but it's not nothing, but it's not much. So natural radiation of this cosmic, radon, potassium-40. How much do we get? The average human being on Earth gets 304 milli-R a year. If you take that 304 and you times it by 1,000, it's 304,000 micro-Rs. And then if you take 304,000 and divide it by 365 days a year, we get 844 micro-Rs every day of radiation. So again, when you go, hey, that scatter, you're going to get 7 micro-Rs. You go, well, you get 840 every day, 844 every day, just being alive and walking around on Earth. So, 7 is not that big of a deal. But again, it's not nothing. So these are the doses. Hopefully you can see these little numbers. There's 2 sets of charts. There's the 85 at 3.2, and then there's the 115 at 4. We'll use the 85 at 3.2 just because it's got smaller numbers, so it's just easier to relate to. So at 90 degrees to your patient. That's coming out, just laterally to your patient there, mid-coronal. At 6 feet away, the two doses averaged out to 6.5 micro-R. At 45 degrees, at 6 feet away, it came out to 11.8. So if it would have been 13, that would have been exactly double. So it's close to double the dose at 45 degrees. At 0 degrees, we started at 6 feet, because anything closer, you'd be literally sitting on their bed or their gurney. And so we figured, okay, well, nobody does that, so there's no reason to start closer than 6 feet. And that is 33.6. So that's a teeny bit more than 5 times more than that. So what this is telling you is, when you're taking a portable on your patient, the best place you can stand is sideways to your patient, except that you can't see them that well. But it's still safety-wise for you, it's the best place you can be. At 45 degrees to your patient, it's going to be almost double the dose than if you would have stood sideways. And at 0 degrees, which is right in front of the patient, which is where most people stand, that is getting 5 times more scatter than if you were standing at 90 degrees. That's how that plays out. So this is when I redid it. We moved things over to this side of the room. So this is 12 feet away. So I'd say that most radiographers and students don't stand 12 feet away. And in California, most of them don't wear a lead apron either, because they just figure, I'm like, 8 feet, 10 feet away. There just can't really be any scatter this far away from everything. But I'm, sad to tell you that there is scatter. So here we are at 12 feet away at 45 degrees. That's how much radiation is hitting your body. Here's the 85 at 3.2. Here's 117 at 4. Now we read this with the reader at 1200 speed. So with our reader, they actually had speeds in there, and you could crank that thing up to where it was like, again, 1200. That was unheard of in the film days, and that's actually more sensitive than my $10,000 dosimeter, as far as reading goes. So then here we are at 0 degrees, and we know that 0's got the worst scatter, but here we are at 12 feet away. That's how much radiation is hitting you at 12 feet away. So you look at this one, you go, man, you can read there's a carpal fracture in there, you'd read it, and that's just off of scatter. That's only at 17 micro-Rs, This one over here is 6 micro-Rs. So there is some dose hitting you, but it's not a lot of dose. Is it bad for you? Don't know, maybe not at all. So this is how I teach all the students how to stand. This is where the lead would hang. I just take that lead, I don't even take it off there. I just open it up, stick my body up against it. So I'm buried in my lead shield right behind that tower. Stick your head out, take a big breath in, hold your breath, come back to where that guy is right there, make your exposure, come back out, you can breathe. And during that split second that there's actually x-rays happening, the worst that's going to happen is your elbows get, some scatter on them. This is a whole section that I have in the large talk, it's close to an hour long, of all these things that have to do with fluoroscopy. So I just picked one of them just to show you what that section will be like. It's called Cross-Table Lateral Hip, Location of the Least Amount of Scatter. So I always thought, we were able to actually take a video crew into the operating room with all of our C-arms and our phantoms and the dosimeter and do all these experiments and demonstrations. We made this entire course on fluoroscopy. And I then took the videos and did screen captures all the way through them, and so that we wouldn't have to just sit there and watch a bunch of video that I shot, and that I would be able to just explain the videos. So in my mind, again, been a tech for 40 years, and only learned this a couple of years ago when we started doing this for the course. But I always thought X-ray kind of went through the body, and by the time I got over here, that there's no way it was really the size of that eye anymore. I figured it was that big, and you're standing right back here, so I just figured by that point this beam that started that small is now that big, And by the time it gets back to you, it's just boom, just hitting you, nailing you. So every time they said x-ray, we're just getting nailed back there, you know, which is why you wanted to wear lead and a thyroid shield and lead glasses, because we're getting nailed. But it turns out to be I was wrong. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to send this little ion chamber around where a person would be standing. So we stood 18. We put it 18 inches away from from the patient. So this is at 60 degrees towards the feet at 18 inches. There are 2 exposures being made. So with a C-arm, all C-arms have a thing called something like a spot exposure or whatever it is that vendor wants to call it. But it's basically you can just hold your finger down, make your exposure, and it doesn't matter that you're still holding it down, the exposure's done. Just like when you take a regular x-ray, you know, it doesn't matter that you're still pushing the button down, the thing's done. So that, all C-arms can make an exposure like that. It's called, on this C-arm, it's called a spot exposure. On the other hand, when you're actually doing it as a tech, you don't use that most of the time. You just do it with your hand, and how fast can you get on it, push the button down, make the exposure, get the image up, and get off that button so that you're not continuing to radiate people. I call that a split-second exposure, an SSE. So that shows you how much dose is really going on in that case. This is something that we could use for experiments because they're all going to be identical exposures. Or this one, you can't say, I pushed it down exactly the same amount of time 50 times in a row. That's impossible. So no one can do it. So you can't use those exposures if you're doing experiments. So we're just going to talk about the spots. So it was 17.7 umpersond R, so that micro R. Now we're at 90 degrees. And all these numbers are going to come up later, so you don't have to remember any of them right now. And it was 15.6 micro R. And now we're at 60 degrees towards the head, and it's 12.8. And now we're at 45 degrees towards the head, and it's 11.9, again, micro Rs. Now we go to the surgeon side, and we're at 60 degrees towards the head, and it's 0.969 milli-R. So just a super fantastic amount more X-ray going on over there. And now we're at 90 degrees, and it's 0.881. And we're at 60 degrees towards the feet, and it's 0.628, and 45 to the feet, 0.468. So the reason that it's so much more is because it's bouncing off the patient and coming back where it came from. You know, now it's bouncing that way, so that's why it's less. But if we go back, you know, that first one, that was the most, right? Because that was the closest to bounce back where it came from. So it's just like on that AP chest where we saw that's what X-ray does. That's what X-ray does. That's why their side's horrible and our side is not horrible, because there's not that much X-ray getting through the patient. And I have a spectacular one I show in the other talk that you'll be seeing next month that shows exactly that, how much X-ray actually gets through the body. And it's crazy how little it is. So then we put it up by the anesthesiologist. So here it is on the right side of the head at 8, you know, and it was it showed a little bit, a 4.9 umpersond R, and then on the other side it was 0. So here's how they all played out. We had to move everything to umpersond R, you know, the micro Rs. So at 45 degrees towards the head, the surgeon's side gets 39 times more than the radiographer's side. At 60 degrees, it's 49 times more. At 90 degrees, it's 56 times more. And at 60 degrees towards the foot, it's 54. So we're looking at, you know, 39 to 56 times more dose on their side. So their side's horrible. Our side is awesome. And that was at 18 inches, you know, we're back here at 50 inches. So the amount of dose we're getting is so tiny that it barely matters. And their side, and they're just getting pummeled over there. So it's something to totally be aware of and know that the faster you can get that SSE, how fast can you make an exposure, get them a good image and get off that button, that is how you're saving everybody in that room as much radiation as you can. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dennis, for your very, very comprehensive talk. And now it's time for the question and answer. I just wonder if the audience from Facebook Live has any question. Please feel free to post on the chat box. It will be either on the right-hand side or it will be underneath the screen, depending on the platform that you are watching from. I got one. Hi, Dennis. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Nahavang. Thanks.
All right. I got one question for you from the audience. The question is, do you use a phantom when you optimize and building your technique, or do you track your patients over time with different techniques? That was the question.
Yeah, anything that we did that we actually got doses, it was always done with a phantom. So yeah, there was never a time, because when you use a dosimeter on a patient, then that actual ion chamber would have been in the way. And so then you wouldn't have been able to actually have a radiologist do a reading on that image, because there'd be a big old ion chamber in the image. So yeah, everything was done always with a phantom.
All right, that's good. I just wondered, speaking from the educator point of view, how do we train our student nowadays? I learned that when I was a radiography student, I learned the positioning from Murrow textbook. So time has changed, and ISRT represent the radiographers from around the world. We may have different in terms of technology that we use, either DCR or DR. For maybe from your perspective, how would you tell the educators from around the world who are watching this program on how to train the student to be capable of dealing with this new technology of CR and DR? It's not that new for us in many countries, but in many countries, they are very new to them.
It's a huge, I talk to educators at least all over the United States. And when we went digital, that was one of the most shocking changes anyone ever saw. And I think a lot of it had to do with almost everybody came from doing the techniques with film. And so once we went digital and you didn't have to be as good anymore, because the equipment's so amazing that it fixed things, that a lot of educators didn't really know how to even teach it. And so even now, here we are, in Champa, we've been doing it for 20 years, and it's still, most of the students have never seen film. They only know digitals, and it's still very, very difficult because the equipment's just so fantastic. So yeah, to say how to do it, I don't even know if I could tell you how to do it. We were so lucky at Chomp because I was actually an educator who could spend time with each student one-on-one and go over it, how important it is. But I don't even know if I could tell you in a nutshell how to do it other than really trying to push home how important it is to use the least amount of technique, which is what this whole talk was about, radiation, and especially the big talk I'm going to be giving, where it's all about radiation safety, and that if you can use less, use less. That's probably the thing I would push home. Anytime you think you got a technique that could go smaller, use less mass. Almost every one of us in the whole world could use less and still have a gorgeous image because the equipment's so fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting the way you put these technique down on the table, like tabulated data that people can look upon about how to optimize the technique. This is something that is really attract my attention because as educator, when I teach my student, most of the time we do AEC technique, and a lot of time technique may be different from one machine to another. And I think this kind of good cookbook for us to be used. So for radiographers from all around the world who are watching this program, I think this will benefit you guys a lot. Donna, you have anything to say? We have our president of Isrrt here, Donna Newman.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. I actually am listening, and I came from the film days. I work in nuclear medicine now, but came back from the early days when we used film and used straight technique. So as I was watching this and I'm looking and understanding, do you believe in the cropping before you take your image just so you have your field of view, or do you leave it wide open? You know, for new radiographers that are out there, what would you recommend best practice for as they're going out in their first new jobs? That it seems like the computer can do everything, but we're still taught safety and lowest dose. So what do you recommend for our new students just coming out in the field?
Yeah, that's a great question. And my big talk, I have a whole section on cropping. So as a little prelim for the big talk, that is just such an important thing. So I'm really glad you asked that. That here in America, we have definitely made it the rule that you are not allowed to crop. Once you have shot your shot and you have whatever you have to turn that in, and to take away any anatomy is basically illegal, because whoever's your reader, whether it's a radiologist or cardiologist or whatever, that person is they are legally bound to read everything that you originally had. So if you then crop it, they're still responsible for it. But it's impossible for them to read it because you've disappeared it. So the rule here is that, although as much as I say it's the rule, it doesn't mean that thousands of people aren't doing it every day. I know they are, but they're not supposed to be doing it. It's supposed to be just like film, where, hey, once it was on that film, it doesn't matter that you could have coned it, and done a nice collimation on it. You didn't. And because you didn't, that's what you're turning in. So you're not really supposed to be touching that image once you've done it, because there are all these other things on there that nobody would have ever possibly, expected. You do a C-spine, and in the mandible, there's a bone tumor, or, that you do a chest x-ray and they can see some free air underneath the abdomen or, underneath the diaphragm. So there's always these kind of miracles that, hey, we didn't expect to see that, but now we do see that. And we only saw that because you didn't crop it out of there. So yeah, the rule is you're not allowed to, if you want to make it a nice tight image, then learn how to be really good with your collimators and do that before you make the exposure.
And I have one more question for you. Because we cover such a wide, vast audience, we have low resource countries and many, many of them that are looking for guidance on education. So they may not have the ability to have that phantom in their department, to do the testing. Yeah. For those of us that are watching that are new, or maybe have CRDR in their area, can you use these charts from room to room, or do you have to create one for your own equipment in your room? Are you able to apply them since you have done that work for our radiographers around the world that don't have the ability to have a phantom in their department?
Wow, another great question. Thanks. So, and in the big talk, when we do this, the kind of the all-day talk, I then get a chance to really go over these charts, where today's talk was really almost just like a little highlight reel of what the big talk's going to be. And so I really get to explain how my charts are set up, of which I have 4 different parts to each one. So there's like the least mass, 33% more mass, 66% more mass, and 100% more mass. So depending on your equipment, and it doesn't really almost even depend on equipment anymore. Almost everybody who's got any kind of in my talk, I call it a modern generator, but that means 1990 and above. So we're talking like the last 30 years. If you got something that's newer than 30 years, then you almost for sure have the kind of generator I'll be talking about. In which case there, it's going to be who's reading your images and how much model are they willing to see? Because ours, like at CHOMP, they wanted to see a little bit. They actually call it diagnostic model and or acceptable model. Those are the terms they actually use in their reading. But some places might say we don't want to see any. So depending on where you are, and then again, it does depend a little bit. I mean, every manufacturer could be a little bit different. So what I teach everybody to do is use my charts that start with 100% more mass, and you start there, and then you look at your exposure index numbers. And from there, it'll tell you, you know what, that they gave you that range, you know, like the Fuji, it's a 400 to 100 range, and you go, but you're only, you know, you're still, you know, near the high end of the dose. So then you go, you could go down some. So then you go to the 66% more mass chart. And then if you can still go down, you go to the 33% more mass chart. And then if you're like we are at CHOMP, we went all the way down to the least mass. So there's how you're going to play with it. But everybody should start with my charts that have the 100% more mass on them. And then there's a whole set of charts for CR and a whole set of charts for DR. So in a nutshell, that's the answer. But again, I'll explain that a lot more in my talk.
Donna, we really have to thank Dennis to wake up this early from California to join our live program because it came to me like, oh, the US just changed the clock back yesterday. So really appreciate that you join us live here today. And I think it's good timing that we may conclude the program for tonight. It's very productive. And again, I have to thank Dennis for giving us this opportunity to learn something very, very exciting, especially for those in less resource places from around the world. And again, we have to thank FUJIFILM for giving this opportunity to us, Mr. Kawakubo, for joining with Isrrt on this education platform.
Thank you very much.
And before we end the program, I would like Donna Newman to say something before to close the program for today.
Absolutely. I want to thank Fuji for this first partnership in academic learning and how appropriate with World Radiography Day being tomorrow. And our theme, the role of the radiographer during the pandemic. It's so fitting that this topic was chosen for our program today because our radiographers all over the world are using digital radiography every day to care for our COVID pandemic patients and all patients. And so it is just fitting to have education on how to reduce exposure, how to have best practice, and to get some tips on how to save ourselves as technologists to reduce our exposure and the staff around us. So thank you, Dennis, for joining us with your expertise. It was very, very valuable. And the exciting part is that it's recorded. So all of our members around the world, if you didn't have a chance to listen to the whole talk, it'll be up on our Facebook Live. Take time to watch it. And thank you again, Fuji, for partnering with us. And happy World Radiography Day a day early. And I would like to turn it over to Fuji to say a few closing words as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Please welcome Mr. Kawakubo for the closing speech.
Closing speech. Thank you very much for the great event. So I think it was very good for everybody. So anyway, we want to support this kind of the activities because our responsibility is how to improve our society or the healthcare system in the countries, especially in this region. So we will never stop our contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And again, we will see you again tomorrow for our special edition of ISRT Facebook Live to celebrate World Radiography Day. Stay tuned. It will be 8 o'clock US time, Central Time this time. So it will be 7 Asia in Thailand time and 8 o'clock for Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines time. All right. We will update to you on our Facebook page about the time for tomorrow's celebration of World Radiography Day. And for today, have a nice day, everyone around the world. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.